Kia ora rā, e ngā taringa mā tini o te motu. Nau areare mai ki tēnei te ringa o Māori Conversations. Welcome to this episode of Māori Conversations. Tonight, we will be in discussion with, of course, Mariameno Kapa-Kingi and our very esteemed manuhiri Kyle Edmonds. Kia ora, bro, tēnā koe. I tō runga ki tēnei o ngā wānanga. I want to thank you again, Kyle, for agreeing to be a part of tonight's Māori conversation and bringing your wisdom, your insights, and your whakaaro for us all to dissect and talk about today. Without further ado, we'll kick off our kōrero I'll get you, Kyle, to tell us a little bit about yourself, your whānau, where you're from, and what kind of mahi you get into.
Yeah, awesome. Kia ora te whānau. Don't know about esteemed, but really awesome opportunity to be a part of this. I thoroughly enjoyed the Māori conversations today. So awesome kaupapa that you're doing, Tipene, and Mariameno and the rest of Te Pāti Māori. So so awesome that we're doing this and that we have the medium to be able to do this from our own homes. So a little bit about myself. Ko Kyle Edmonds tōku ingoa. I'm from Te Tai Tokerau, and but currently down in Takapua here in Poriroa, down at the opposite end of the motu. So yeah, three of the four of my grandparents are Ngāti Wai through and through. So my i te taho tōku māma, we have the Waitfords from sort of Whananaki and the Ngāwakas from Great Barrier Island, from Aotea, Ngāti Rehua. And then my grandfather is he's a rata and a maki from Takehiwai. And so two different parts of the rohe there. And then i te taho tōku pāpa, so the Edmonds whānau from Mount Punaruku, Whangaruru there. And then my grandmother is she's from Ngāti Toa Rangatira, in Ngāti Kōata, and so awesome opportunity to be down here with her people, and we've been here for 5.5 years now, but I was born and bred in Te Nota and Whangarei there, and so yeah, it's really cool to reconnect with whānau down here, but it's pretty obvious that I've got a lot of time and my heart still resides up in Te Tai Tokerau. For mahi, so we moved down here 5.5 years ago. I work in the investment space. I worked at a BNZ private bank for a time, and they brought me down here. But for sort of 3.5 years, I've been at a firm called Jarden, and previously they were called First NZ Capital. They were part of the Credit Suisse group, essentially an investment bank that does share broking, retail and institutional share broking, private equity, funds management, and in the department I work in is wealth management. And fundamentally, my role is as a wealth management advisor and portfolio manager. I look after putia for large organisations, for iwi, for hapu, land trusts, foundations, charities, and I advise them on the investment portfolio. So yeah, that's why we're here.
Awesome, bro. Too much. E mihi ana I tō whakapapa me o pukenga kua whakapato I a koe I tēnei pō. Mum, I understand you have a little bit to do with Kyle's dad. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that hononga?
Kia ora, e te katoa tēnā no tātou. Kyle, lovely to have you on tonight, darling, and in this conversation. So I worked with your dad some years ago, in fact, when I first moved back to Te Tai Tokerau, and I have more recently worked with him in the Te Kahotaunui space, leading out as one of the senior leaders and chiefs, really, in that space. Keeping our whānau well and safe in Te Tai Tokerau, and he's a key player. And so having him, in fact, in one of the Māori conversations initially with Te Rōpū Pō, it was great to work with him again, and great to have a more Māori conversation like it is with you.
Kia ora.
And running off that kōrero about your dad, Kyle, do you, your dad obviously being a leader for Ngāti Wai, do you kind of play a support role for your dad, and do you also see yourself moving into that sort of leadership role in the future for your iwi?
Yeah, so if anything, I'm a bit of a sounding post for him. And he often sort of gives me a call and asks for my thoughts on different things, and I'm happy to share that. And so from afar, I like to think that I'm giving some half decent advice, but ultimately he's his own man, and he's got to where he is because of his values and who he is and his skill set. So so credit to him for that. And if anything, I've learnt a whole heap from him. In terms of governance, it is a space that I do enjoy. And I guess the reason I got into the mahi that I'm involved in is because, as you know, Ngāti Wai hasn't settled yet. And so early on in the piece, when I was going to university, I was initially studying property valuation, and so I was sort of heading in a property development route. But I recognised that early on in the piece, so all good and well once we reach settlement, but then it seems kind of conflicting that we reach settlement and then we hand over a big portion of our putia to almost like a tauiwi construct to corporations, to corporates that tell us how to look after our money. And so for me, I thought, maybe I can acquire those skill sets, and so I can position myself at a time when I've accrued all the skill sets and position myself where I can help our people, not just Ngāti Wai, but Te Iwi Māori. And so it's kind of panned out pretty well. And so I kind of advise a number of Māori entities throughout the motu. And and moving down here, I'm on audit risk committees with Ngāti Toa, Ngāti Kōata, and I'm kind of in the advisory space where I can do that. I can fulfill ultimately the aspirations that I had in terms of my career. So it's a blessing.
Awesome, bro. And Meno Kyle's just told us about how he acts as a tautoko, support for his father, and also how he's gone to acquire the skills necessary to support his iwi as well. How important do you think these sorts of notions are, intergenerational collaboration, if you will, between Kyle and his father? How important do you think those values are in terms of the continuity and succession of iwi organisations and iwi leadership?
I think they're critical, and I think without them we will fail. So many of us in my era have been setting and moving our young ones into these spaces, some really actively, and Tipene and Kyle, you'll know because they're all around you. You're in those places not by accident. You're placed there because you are the next line, you're the next lot of battalion coming through for Te Tai Tokerau and for the motu. You have a reo, so you have a whole other type of cultural capital in your businesses, in any of your work that is, it's a whole other level of Māori thinking and Māori paradigm. And so that's it's critical. And the more we do that, and the more you foster that, you were just talking about that just before, Kyle, you and your group of, 200 followers in Māori business, young guns, really young Māori corporate warriors gathering and getting yourself organised to keep yourself, together as Māori and growing in that sector. I think it's critical.
Tēnā koe, I la kōrero man. Our next part, still on the theme of kind of the future of Māori leadership, iwi leadership. This one's for you, Kyle. What are your aspirations for Ngāti Wai and Te Tai Tokerau as a whole, and Te Iwi Māori as well?
That's a good question. For me, I think whilst there's a time and a season for things, right? And I think there's been a time and a season for sort of looking back and acknowledging the mamae that we have from colonization. And whilst that is still there, I think that to an extent that hinders us in terms of sort of forward looking and trying to accelerate the process of forward looking and having collaborative approaches together, but ultimately heading in the same direction. There's a whakatauki that goes along the lines of all wakas rising together, and I'm a big fan of all wakas rising together, which is reverting back to my career. It wasn't about whilst I was looking at Ngāti Wai and being a bit selfish around acquiring the skill sets to help Ngāti Wai. It wasn't just Ngāti Wai. It was Te Ao Māori. It was helping all of us, allowing all waka to rise together. And it's tough for waka to rise together when there's there's too many captains or too many wannabe captains. And so whilst there's always going to be fractions, some that are still holding on to the mamae a bit more than others, and then there's going to be the innovators and the thought leaders and the ones that are trying to move forward. That becomes really oxymoronic for the waka to rise because they're contradictory of each other. And so now for me, whilst I acknowledge our past and how tough it's been for us, and that sort of delayed settlement for a lot of Te Tai Tokerau, I would love to see a time where we can sort of move forward at a quicker pace to allow our waka to rise together, because I reckon the world is our oyster in Te Tai Tokerau. There's a lot of opportunity there. We've been a low socioeconomic and high unemployment for a long time now, and it doesn't have to be the case. Our waka can rise together if we're all sort of rowing in the same direction, and and only allowing a handful of captains. We don't all need to be captains. It's just sort of get down and do the mahi.
Yeah, definitely, bro. I agree with your point around working together and collaborating as te iwi Māori. I think we often get caught up in iwi-centric perspectives, and it leads to us working in silos, and it dilutes our potential as a people as well. We're already the minority in our own country, and if we continue to divide ourselves, then we continue to dilute our potential. E mihi ana ki tērā whakaaro. Mum, did you have any thought around that?
No, I just fully agree. I think our part, and certainly in terms of Pāti Māori and our current lineup and all our supporters, we're working towards that movement. Like we're setting the ground really, or we're setting the horizon, so that every single one of us, and are all part of that that uplift, but part of the designing of it, even and the kicking it around and the development. So we're not spectators to our future. We are on the court. We're playing the game. We're driving the strategy. We're succeeding and failing forward all the time. So when I'm listening to you, Kyle, that's all I'm thinking. Yeah, this is it. This is definitely a tipping point. And we've got to take it and keep driving it forward. This is our future, and we're going to make that happen for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just gets frustrating too when there's a 2-step forward and 3 steps back. That you kind of see throughout, not just in Te Tai Tokerau, but all throughout the motu. And this is pre-settlement and post-settlement sort of governance entities, and iwi all throughout the country is sort of dealing with that. And it's almost like we forget, or some of our whānau and in different iwi forget who they're fighting against, so to speak. And it's it turns into fighting against whānau and hapu against hapu, all within the iwi. And and that gets frustrating for me, because I'm thinking, if we want to, or if all waka needs to rise together, we all need to be singing the same tune and from the same book. But that frustrates the process, and then it takes us back. And I'm in the investment game, and and sort of investment 101 is time value of money, and time value of money in essence is if you have money today to invest today, then you're so much better off in 10 years' time because of compound interest, versus you get that money later dated at a future value, then you've missed out on all the compound. And so I think the same sort of context of time value of money is sort of just time value of attitudes, time value of any asset that you have. And so that forward momentum, that compounding year in, year out, can become so much better off in 10 years' time, not just for Pūtea, but for all aspects of an iwi, for all aspects of Te Ao Māori. But it's hindered when the process is frustrated by conflict.
I think I heard this the other day, and I disagree with it completely. We are our own worst enemy. I completely disagree. We know who the enemy is, right? So, and yeah, I mean, we've got things to deal with, but we know where all of that starts with. So yeah, know who your enemy is. We've got to back ourselves completely and 1,000%. So believe in the potential, believe in ourselves.
Absolutely.
Kia ora. Our next pātai is again relates to our aspirations for Te Iwi Māori from an economic perspective. So for you, Kyle, when you hear the words Māori economy, what springs to mind? What do you imagine when you hear those words?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is you hear it sort of thrown around from different crowds. KPMG have done a report, Deloitte have done a report, TDB Advisory, a whole bunch of these entities have done reports, and they talk about a $50 billion Māori economy. And when I think of Māori economy, I think of two sort of layers. And the first layer, which is kind of the base layer, is fundamentally settlement assets. So assets that are received in settlement that have kind of just grown over time purely by having them, through ownership versus previously they were the Crown. And if you, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei is a really good sort of observation, because they got a whole bunch of property. We all know what the house price inflation has done to Auckland property, and so that's been really, really favourable to them. And that's awesome. And so what that's done is that's grown the balance sheet, that's grown sort of Māori economy. The second part of that bottom layer is is primary industries, and it's our fishery assets, our quota. Then you've got things like beef and lamb, dairy, honey, all those primary industries. And then the second layer would be kind of a more innovative approach for some iwi that have kind of got into like housing, tourism, health, education. That's probably that second layer. But $50 billion seems like a big balance sheet, but I reckon it can be so much bigger. We can leverage that if we have a united and a collective effort. If we do it more collaboratively, we can leverage that balance sheet, and there's no reason why it can't be 200 billion. And I think there was a time for austerity, and austerity in the sense that you receive your settlement and then you sit on your assets and you don't necessarily sort of do much with it because there's no need to do anything at the moment. And so that was kind of an austerity measure, which is kind of needed sort of initially in post-settlement world. But then there's a time where like the current where interest rates are really, really low, and so and they're going to be low for a decent amount of time because central governments all around the world, central banks are trying to keep them low to foster consumerism. But then that creates an opportunity for us for a V-shaped recovery. Economists are talking about what that recovery is going to look like. What it's going to look like. Is it going to be a U-shape? Are we going to be kind of at the trough for a decent amount of time before we kind of bounce up, or are we going to sort of go for that V-shaped recovery, or a W or an L? Ultimately, we want to be a V-shaped recovery, and I think as a Māori economy, we well and truly can do that if we can do it collaboratively, innovatively, if we're forward thinking, and if we take an approach together, united effort.
Yeah, bingo. So you just talked talked about some of the barriers that are preventing us from getting to that 200 billion Māori economy. Collaboration is one, innovation is one. Kind of at a whānau level, at an iwi level, what are some of the other barriers that you've witnessed that are blocking Māori from not only fueling the economy, but from being active participants in the economy?
Couple of things. I think there's the first thing is there's this love for primary industries, and I can appreciate that because we're tangata whenua, and we are people of the land. This is our land, and we're trying to take ownership of that. But COVID is a massive example of where primary industries can shoot ourselves in the foot. And so if we're more innovative in terms of our of what mahi we want to get into, we can create vertical integrated sort of mahi all the way through. Like, for example, if we've got a whole bunch of, Ngāti Wai is a good example, got a whole bunch of quota and and fisheries assets as a result of that. If we take the approach where we want to be a bit more innovative and we want to sort of have the entire chain vertically integrate something, we could have something like a nutraceuticals company where we're getting fish and then we're creating fish oil tablets or something like that. That's really, really, really innovative, and it's a bit out there. But I think thinking innovatively, having entrepreneurial sort of conversations allows us to shift away from having a reliance on a primary industry, and it gives us the flexibility times like this when when we can't export or there's difficulty in exporting, and we're not constrained to that. We can do sort of alternative things. So that's the first thing, is just having this this love for primary industries. And I think that's fine. But if we horizontally integrate or vertically integrate, so we can sort of tap into and clip the ticket at multiple sort of areas. And another, I think, is just a lack of confidence, and that confidence is probably through a lack of education. So I feel for our whānau that are in sort of regional areas that aren't exposed to things that so say Ngāti Toa, for example, which is we're down here in Wellington, and and we have an opportunity to sort of sit at a number of government sort of board tables, so to speak, and so we're privy to different things as opposed to some of our whānau that are regionally based, and so they might not have the skill sets or the education or the understanding, and so they have to focus on what they know. And so I think it's about broadening horizons, and that's what I love about my mahi, is sort of trying to get around to those types of whānau, those iwi, those hapu, and sort of allowing them to sort of lift their vision, and to and to teach them different ways that they can sort of utilize their balance sheet. And I think if they open up their eyes open, they lift their gaze, there's the oyster is that much bigger for them.
So Kyle's talked about diversifying, innovating, broadening our vision of what a Māori economy looks like from A to B to C, and also kind of educating our the upcoming generations to lift that vision, to realise that vision. What are your whakaaro around that space, especially in the education, and the whakaaro around education?
Tipene, just want to a little bit winding back a bit to the what do I hear when I hear Māori economy? I hear power, I hear trade, I hear control, and I hear autonomy. So I hear those things, and those are the things that we're preparing for. On the weekend I went to I was at a hui up in Kyle, and most definitely one of the wahine, the kai kōrero there, talked about hongi hika, talked about trade, talked about the humble riwai, and just bringing that under the maramataka model, saying this is this worked for us then, it can work for us now, bringing it through as an education model. So So I think that landed well across the whole hui. And that's what came to mind when you were talking, listening to you, Kyle. So when I hear Māori economy, those words, I hear mana motuhake. I hear whatever the business, whatever our young ones in education and schooling, which isn't the same thing necessarily, whatever their desire and their interest is, the opportunities have to be set for them to do what they need to do and love what they're doing. So that's what I hear. I want to just comment on austerity, Carl. It's an interesting idea when we're living in poverty. You know, when too many of our whānau and Tai Tokerau are in those factors, so austere is a bit. It doesn't line up with the reality of many in Tai Tokerau, and so part of our whole whānau first policy framework is to flip that around, that so the jobs and the businesses and the focus is on Māori businesses, Māori ideas, Māori capacity, cultural capability. Again, Māori economy is the cultural capability that I think we have, which is unique to anyone else. So if we're talking about tourism, you know, our own ideas and our own people and our own businesses, designing those and making those businesses grow and flourish in Tai Tokerau. So that's what I hear.
Awesome. Hei pātai whakatepe I wā tātou kōrero I tēnei pō. Just pātai to wrap up our conversation for tonight. This one ties in with the catch cry of Māori Party for this campaign, for this election, and that's to believing in ourselves, believing in Māori, believing in our potential, which we'll in depth tonight. So Kyle, I'll get you to answer this one first. What's one good reason for Māori to believe in themselves?
We're tangata whenua, all right, tangata whenua, and so you know this is our land, and I think it's fundamentally when we truly understand that, then that's kind of like us knowing who we are, and why we're here, where we came from. You know, I'm from a religious family, and you know, in our faith we talk about fulfilling the measure of our creation, and I think it's you know, it's the same for being Māori. The measure of our creation is being tangata whenua and stepping up and knowing who we are, knowing that this is our land and we have rights and we have opportunities, and taking and embracing that and fulfilling the measure of our creation.
Awesome, bro. Tēnā koe I tērā kōrero, I rā whakaaro.
Just a little bit nervous following that conversation. That's tēnā hoki koe e Kyle. So the belief. So e tikana tangata whenua tātou. So we're set for that position. I think it's the only thing we can be. I think it's. I think this point in time, I think Tipene, we're ready to take back, in fact, and take the control and the power back and right in our hands and in Pāti Māori. I think those are that's what I believe in. That's what I'm growing all of you to believe in. And yeah, I see no other way. I see no other way for us to claim and reset and rejuvenate Māori.
Kārawe. Tēnā kaurua I o kaurua whakaaro, I a kaurua kōrero. Tēnā no koe kāio I tō urunga mai ki tēnei o ngā kōrero. Ka mātua I tēnā mo tēnei pō, kei te mihi anō ki te hunga whakarongo, kia koutou e areare mai nā I o koutou nā wāhi, I o koutou nā kainga. Huri noa I te motu, e te ti, e te tā, tēnā rau atu tātou.
Kia ora.